I arrived before the caterers, before the cousins, before anyone who would later act as though the party had simply materialized on its own. That was the arrangement, unspoken but consistent across every Thanksgiving, every 4th of July, every occasion my father's new household needed to look like a family that had it together. I would show up, unlock the side entrance, and begin the invisible work of turning an empty backyard into something that photographed well. That Easter was no different, except that it was the last one. The yard still held the night's rain when I arrived. Folding tables were stacked against the back fence where my stepmother Cora had left them sometime in the previous week. I hauled them out 2 at a time, set up the chairs, spread the rented linens I'd ordered and paid for 10 days earlier. The plastic eggs were in a cardboard box in the storage room, along with the extension cords, the portable speaker, and 2 coolers that still faintly remembered last summer's beer. I arranged the egg hunt trail myself, tucking eggs behind the raised garden beds, under the hydrangeas, around the base of the old sycamore in the corner. By 9 in the morning, the yard looked like a celebration. The trick to that kind of work is that the better you do it, the less anyone notices it was done at all. My name is Marlowe, and for roughly 11 years I had been the operational backbone of my father's holiday calendar. Not because anyone asked me outright. It had accreted gradually, the way responsibilities do when you're competent and present and slightly too unwilling to say no. I'd grown up in that house, and when my father married Cora, I'd told myself that staying useful was a reasonable way to stay connected. I'm a project coordinator for a mid-sized event logistics company, which means I know how to manage vendors, confirm timelines, and hold a budget together under pressure. Skills the family benefited from regularly, though no one would have described it that way. They would have said I was helpful. They would have said I loved doing it. The catering confirmation came through on my phone at 9:47. I'd contracted through a local kitchen that Cora had mentioned once in passing, liked the sound of, and then never followed up on. I'd called them, arranged the menu, submitted the deposit, and confirmed the final headcount the previous Tuesday. 43 people. A full afternoon spread. The balance had cleared my account the Thursday before. By mid-morning, the yard was filling. My brother Theo arrived with his 2 kids, who immediately demanded to know when the egg hunt was starting. Cousins I hadn't seen since the previous November drifted in with wine bottles and questions directed exclusively at me. Where do the desserts go? Is there parking on the side street? Do you need help with anything? I told them where things went. I answered the parking question. I said I was fine. Cora walked through the yard once around 11, nodding at the tables, the linens, the arrangement of chairs. She had the expression of someone reviewing work they'd commissioned. My father spent the morning near the fire pit with 2 neighbors from the cul-de-sac, talking about something that required a lot of arm gesturing. He didn't ask when I'd arrived. No one did. The egg hunt ran at 1 o'clock and went exactly as those things do, loud, briefly chaotic, over in 12 minutes. Kids ran across the still damp grass, while adults stood at the perimeter with drinks, laughing at nothing in particular. One of my cousins told me I'd outdone myself this year. I thanked her and meant none of it. Not because I was ungrateful, but because the compliment arrived at the wrong address. It was the kind of praise that confirms you're useful without suggesting you're welcome. The catering van arrived at 3:30. I met the crew at the side gate, walked them through the kitchen layout, showed them the outlet situation, confirmed the service timeline. The lead, a man named Derek, recognized me from the Thanksgiving booking. Same contact as before, he asked. Same contact, I said. Everything's already settled on the account. He nodded and started directing his team. The afternoon reached that specific quality that good outdoor gatherings sometimes achieve, the sense that everything is running exactly as it should, and no one needs to do anything but enjoy it. The yard was full. Conversations overlapped pleasantly. Kids who'd been frantic 2 hours earlier were now calm and sugar calm near the dessert table. The catering trays were warming in the kitchen, the smell of the food drifting out through the screen door. My father was at the head of the long table when he said it. He wasn't shouting. He used the particular register he reserved for corrections made in company, loud enough to carry, quiet enough to seem casual. He looked at me and said that I had to understand I was a guest in his home now, not a member of the household, and that guests didn't run things. Cora sat beside him, her expression composed and confirming. Theo stared at his plate with the focused attention of someone who had found something extremely important in the pattern of the ceramic. The yard went quieter than yards usually go. I stood up from my chair without rushing. A few people assumed I was going inside to bring something out. Someone near the end of the table asked if dinner was starting. I didn't answer either question. The kitchen was cool and organized. Derek's crew was doing final prep, lifting the foil covers to check temperatures. I picked up my bag from the counter where I'd left it that morning. Pulled out my phone. The catering account was still open on the screen. Derek came in a minute later. Ready to begin service? I need to cancel it, I said. He looked at me. I'm the account holder. I need to stop the service and return the order. There is a specific quality to bureaucratic authority that has nothing to do with volume or emotion. It is simply a matter of whose name is on the invoice. Mine was on every document, every confirmation email, the deposit receipt, and the final payment. I called the company's main line, the same number I'd used to place the original order, and submitted a cancellation request in the same tone I use on any vendor call. Steady. Factual. Procedural. When I hung up, Derek nodded once. Understood. We'll repack. The confusion outside started gradually, the way it always does when the architecture of an event begins to come apart without announcement. People noticed the catering staff moving equipment. Trays being covered and lifted back toward the van. The buffet line that had been forming naturally along the fence wasn't forming anymore. I was in the front hallway when my father came inside. What's happening with the food? It's leaving, I said. He looked at me for a long moment. What do you mean it's leaving? I thought this was arranged. It was arranged under my account. He processed that. The mechanics of it were simple, but the implications took a few seconds. You can't just walk out of here, he said. I adjusted the strap on my bag. I thought I was a guest. I didn't deliver the line for effect. It was simply the most accurate sentence available. Behind him, Derek appeared in the hallway entrance and explained quietly that since the account holder had requested cancellation, he said it the way people in service industries explain policy to upset customers, clear, impersonal. My father had no procedural counter to that. There wasn't one. Theo was standing in the hallway. He had followed my father inside and was watching from near the stairs. For the first time since he'd arrived that morning, he was looking directly at me rather than at a middle distance. I nodded at him once. Then I walked out the front door. From the driveway, I could hear the yard changing behind me. Voices rising with questions. Chairs scraping back. Children asking why the food was going in the wrong direction. The gathering was unraveling in the specific way that gatherings do when the organizational layer beneath them is removed all at once. Driving away felt less like a decision, and more like the conclusion of a very long equation. For years I'd operated on the assumption that usefulness was a currency that purchased something. Belonging, maybe. Or at least the right to occupy a room without being reminded that the room wasn't mine. What I understood now on the interstate heading south was that I'd confused two things that were never the same. 40 minutes later, my phone showed a message from Theo. He said he hadn't understood how much I'd been carrying. I read it twice. I set the phone down without answering. I stopped at a diner near the county line, the kind with vinyl booths and fluorescent lighting that flatters no one. I ordered coffee and a slice of coconut cream pie and sat in the window booth while the sky went from pink to dark outside. Somewhere back across town, a family gathering was concluding without its infrastructure. Someone would figure out dinner. Or they wouldn't. For the first time in 11 years, neither outcome required anything from me. That feeling didn't have a clean name. It wasn't relief exactly, and it wasn't grief. It was something that felt like arriving at the correct answer to a problem you've been solving for a decade. Some people spend years making themselves indispensable to spaces that have quietly decided they are optional. The labor gets normalized. The resentment gets buried. And eventually you're setting up folding tables in a wet backyard at 8 in the morning for people who will spend the afternoon reminding you of your place. Have you ever looked around at something you built and asked yourself honestly whether the people inside it have ever actually asked you to stay?